One of the hardest things about running is figuring out when you're sort of allowed to increase your paces. So how do you know when to run a faster easy pace? How do you know when to increase the pace of your tempo runs or your lactate threshold workouts? This is very, very difficult for runners. And in this video, I want to explain a few frameworks for how to do this for yourself. So that if you're ever experiencing rapid increases in fitness, or maybe you're just not sure what your pace might be for a given workout, this video should give you a much more clear guidance on how to figure that out for yourself. Now, the first thing that we have to do is differentiate between certain types of paces. There are certain workouts and paces that are based on race paces. And then there are some workouts that are based more on physiological efforts. And when we talk about when to increase these paces, it really does depend on what kind of a pace we're talking about. So let's first start with race paces, because these are a little bit easier. Your 5K race pace is whatever your pace is that you've averaged per mile or per kilometer for a 5,000 meter race. It's pretty simple. Same thing with any other race pace based pace. So your 5K pace, your marathon pace, your 10K race pace, your 1 mile race pace. These are all pretty easy. And then of course we can look at goal race paces. So maybe you're a 3:25 marathoner and you really want to run 3:15. Your goal marathon pace is going to be that average pace for a 3:15 finish. And this is how we can figure out all of our race paces. It's based on your current fitness level, what you're currently capable of doing in a given race distance, and you could be a little bit aspirational when it comes to your goal race pace. These paces are based on your ability over a certain distance. They're not based on what's happening internally in your body physiologically. So we don't have to really worry about your heart rate, lactate levels, anything like that. We're not worried about rating of perceived effort. This is a very specific pace per mile or per kilometer based on what you have accomplished in a given race distance. Now, the other types of paces that we're going to run in workouts are a little bit more physiologically based than based on a race. These are things like your lactate threshold or even your easy running pace. These paces are not based on what you have accomplished in a race distance. They're more based on your physiology. This is where we do care about heart rate, about perceived effort, about lactate levels. If we look at your zones, they're technically based on lactate. Your zone 2 threshold is based on when levels of lactate in your blood start gradually rising. You're still in zone 1 when you're able to keep those levels of lactate stable. And of course, your lactate threshold is when those levels of lactate become unsustainable. So if you can stay at that slightly more sustainable level of lactate, you're at a good lactate threshold effort. So these are physiological efforts that are based more on what's happening inside your body. And when it comes to knowing when to change these paces, it's really important to know what kind of pace we're talking about, because it very much depends on each one of these paces. So rule number 1 of changing your paces is, number 1, let's remember that changing a race-based pace is far easier than changing a more physiological based pace. So if you want to run a faster 5K, you can do your 5K workouts at a pace that is faster than your current 5K race pace. Not substantially, maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds per mile, maybe about 5 or 10 seconds per kilometer. That's probably where we should draw the line. But there's flexibility, because these paces, again, are not really based on physiology. And so for most runners, if we're talking about a 5K race pace or a 2 mile, 3K, 1 mile race pace, no matter what it is, we are still anaerobic. We are in zone 5 for all of those paces. So it doesn't really matter if we're a little bit faster. We're still gonna get the same physiological effect, and we may even be training our body neuromuscularly to better handle that slightly faster pace that we want to run, that goal pace. So when it comes to race paces, we can be aspirational, we can be a little bit more aggressive. When it comes to physiological based paces, this is where we need to be more careful, because again, this is based on heart rate, effort, it's based on how your body is feeling, your levels of lactate, and that doesn't change potentially as quickly as what you might experience with a race pace. So we should probably change our easy running effort and our lactate threshold workouts a little bit more conservatively. And in fact, when we're talking more specifically about a lactate threshold workout, I would rather you be a little bit too slow than a little bit too fast, because you're going to break through that anaerobic threshold, then be running anaerobic. You're gonna have too much lactate in your system, too many hydrogen ions, and you're not really gonna get the same benefit from that workout. I'd rather you be a little bit too slow. Something very similar is happening with your easy running pace. I would rather you be a little bit too slow than a little bit too fast. Let's stay in zone 2 rather than spending too much time in zone 3, because this is where our injuries come from. Our injuries come from pushing the pace too hard on our easy runs when we should be running at an easier effort and really recovering. So let's recognize that we can be more aggressive with race paces, but we should be more conservative with physiology-based paces. I have upgraded my daily greens mix. You have to try how good Previnex's Gut and Green Superfoods mix is. It tastes way better than my last greens mix, and I'm so happy to have made the switch. Now, not just because it tastes better, but because it has twice the fiber, it has clinically proven ingredients that help with digestion and gut health, and it actually has fewer ingredients. And this is actually a good thing. My last greens mix had dozens and dozens of greens in it, but in such tiny quantities that you're not getting much out of it. I'd rather focus on quality over quantity. And like everything from Previnex, they have clinically studied ingredients that are going to help with your GI system, your digestion. It's going to reduce inflammation and really help with your gut health. So thank you, Previnex, for using clinically verified ingredients. You got to check out their amazing apple flavor on Previnex.com. And if you want 20% off, use code JASONGREENS. And by the way, for every order, Previnex donates a bottle of multivitamins to kids in need. So thank you, Previnex. Now, I'm a big believer in performance-based pacing, where you base your pacing off of your performances. It's just sort of a fancy way of saying we're basing your current training paces off of your current fitness level and what you're currently capable of right now. So because of that, we are going to base your paces off of race performances. And so the best way to know when to increase your paces is when you've had a little bit of a breakthrough in a race, when you've run a PR, when you've run faster than you ever have before. This is the perfect time to start gradually ratcheting up the paces that you're going to be running, so that when it comes to workouts, you're running a little bit faster than you were before. And that's how you can keep prompting those adaptations that you really want. Because if you're getting faster in the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, it stands to reason that your training paces should increase as well. I firmly believe that runners sort of have to earn their training paces in race situations. And until then, we've got to be a little bit more conservative so that we don't burn ourselves out, we don't get injured. But a word of warning, even if you do have a big PR, you may find that your easy running pace doesn't get substantially faster. You might go out there and run the same effort that you normally do, and then at the end of the run, you look down at your watch, and it was sort of the same pace that you always do. This is okay. This is often because maybe you're training more and you might be more tired. And again, this is a little bit more based on effort. And so I'm not too worried about your easy running pace changing too much over time. It's not a big determinant of your performance as a runner. So don't worry about that. Let's worry about pacing, particularly when it comes to races and those race-based workouts. All of the other more physiology-based workouts that we do and runs, like an easy effort run, are a little bit more based on feel, and you can be more flexible with those paces. You don't have to worry so much about performance. Now, I hope this is helpful for you as you're figuring out your paces for an upcoming season, figuring out how fast or how slow you should be running certain workouts. And one thing you might notice is that I didn't really talk too much about zones. I didn't talk about, the RPE specific numbers that you should run workouts. And that's because I find it often counterproductive to train by zone because we don't race by zone. Nobody ever says, I'd really like to run my marathon at a zone 3.6. It's just sort of not how runners talk about training and racing. And so zones can be helpful frameworks for understanding intensity zones, but they're not actually how the sport operates. It's not how we structure our effort in race situations. So I always like to train mostly via pace, so that when we get to the race, we have prepared in the same way that we are trying to execute that race. In other words, we studied in English because the test is also in English. The last thing you want to do is study in English only to find out that the test is in Mandarin. That's sort of what happens when a lot of runners use RPE or zones, and then they try to execute a really specific pace on race day, and they haven't really trained by pace. So I'll certainly encourage most runners to train by pace. If you're an ultra marathoner, it might be a little bit less needed in that scenario, so you can worry a little bit more based on effort and zones. But for most runners, I think there's a case to be made that pacing is how most runners should train. And I really hope this video gave you a few frameworks for understanding how and when to change your paces. Because as we progress, as we get better, we earn those faster paces, and they help us continue adapting and continuing to get faster.